Right, welcome everyone to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting of Monday the 6th of September. We were recording this meeting and run it remotely. Item 1, apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Robert Williams, a lay member, and from Councillor Julian Amos. And I think we're all here then. Yes, we're all present. Item 2, declarations of interest, taking into account A and B on the agenda. I just need to bring to your attention on the annual internal audit report, which starts at page 167. But if you take you to page 179, 3.2, it refers there to Cyfarthfa High School's follow-up report marked as unsatisfactory. I am an LEA governor on that school. So it's I'm covered in respect of being an LEA member. Any other declarations of interest? No, no one's indicated. Then go on to the open session. That's item 3, and that's the provisional statement of accounts for 2021, including the draft annual governance statement. And that's to consider the report of the Chief Executive, and it's on pages 5 to 166. And Steve Jones is going to take us through this report, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so what we've got is the annual statement of accounts, and this includes the draft annual governance statement for last year. So that's ending the 31st of March 21. It's indicated under 3.1 that under the Accounts and Audit Wales regs, that the accounts were to be signed off by the 31st of May and then approved at full council by the 31st of July. It's owing to the current circumstances and the pandemic, those dates have been revised, so we were able to, as set out in paragraph 3.3, that the accounts were to be drafted and completed in draft format by the 31st of August. And in fact, we actually completed that task by the 15th of July. And then we have to have the accounts audited and reported, and then reported to council and approved by council by the 30th of November. I'd like to point out as well that I'll be going through the executive summary. So it's this report. I shan't be going through the actual accounts themselves, which are included as Appendix A. And at this point as well, I just would like to thank Adele and the team and for all the hard work that they've done as well with the actual accounts. I'd also like to point out at this stage under 3.5 is that the accounts will now not be reported to the council on the 6th of October. Instead, the council date will be the 3rd of November. And again, the accounts will not be reported to the audit committee, to the Governance and Audit Committee of the 4th of October, but will now be reported to the 18th of October. So paragraph 4 then sets out that the accounts will be compiled and in practice with the International Financial Reporting Standards, which contain various accounting statements which we have to comply with. And paragraph 5 then indicates that we've also included, as part of the accounts, our share in jointly controlled operations, and those are Inspector Shoycourt Crematorium, the Central South Consortium, and the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. So then if we go on to section 6, which then starts to look at the nitty-gritty part of the actual accounts themselves. And as I stated earlier, although it says under 6.1 now that the final accounts will be reported to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 4th, that'll be the 18th of October. So going into the financial element then of the actual statement of account summary, paragraph 7.1, that indicates our revenue outturn for the financial year. And again, I'm pleased to actually report that we are indicating a provisional net revenue surplus of nearly £4.5 million. And as can be seen from the table under 7.1, some of the main areas for that surplus falls under social services, where we are indicating an underspend of nearly £2.2 million, and the reasons for that will follow later. And then we've got some major underspends as well then in respect of neighbourhood services, £645,000, and also within corporate vacancy factor, our contribution to the general reserve and the provision for further commitments. So as is indicated, we have a projected surplus outturn or a draft surplus outturn of nearly £4.5 million. And the proposal then is that £3.8 million will be transferred to earmarked reserves and £634,000 will be added to the authority general reserves. And that's indicated in that table under 7.1.1, which shows how that £4.464 million will be allocated. So 7.1.2, that indicates some of the variances within the accounts for last year and within social care and also within our just neighbourhood services. And also then we go on to some of the underspends and overspends within our corporate costs, which include our capital financing costs and our council tax reduction scheme. We are also showing quite a significant budget surplus against our corporate vacancy factor, and that surplus stands at £681,000. And we are also showing a surplus here, whereas we are going to present our general reserves in a different format. So at this point in time, it does suggest that we have a surplus on that budget line. So that's our revenue outturn. If I can move on to our capital outturn for last year, and as is evident, we have an underspend of £3.7 million. And on the funding basis, the majority of that underspend then of nearly £3.1 million reflects against our capital grants. And again, under 7.2.1, we set up there some of the major variances within capital for the financial year. And those are in respect of physical regeneration, riverside, its engineering and transport infrastructure, and also land, buildings and corporate. So that gives a snapshot of both our revenue and our capital outturn. So moving on then to paragraph 7.3, and this indicates that as at the 31st of March 2021, we have increased our general reserves from £4.7 million to £5.334 million. And that equates to 4% of our net revenue expenditure. And as you recall, within our corporate reserves policy, we state that our general reserves should lie between 3.5% and 4% of our net revenue expenditure. So we're at that upper limit of that threshold, which is a very healthy state. So then moving quickly then on to the annual governance statement. And again, as set out in the accounts and Audit Wales regs, we have to assess the actual effectiveness of our system of internal control and the governance arrangements within the annual statement of accounts. I'd also like to draw your attention to a new section within the annual governance statement, and that is itemized under 8.5, and that's in respect of the Financial Management Code of Practice. Whereas, although the full compliance to the code is not expected until this year, until 21-22, we've had a shadow year in 2021, and we can confidently state that within our AGS it has been reported that we can demonstrate compliance with all 17 standards within the Financial Management Code of Practice, but it is recognised as well that further improvements can be made. Again, then within the AGS, I'd like to factor in on 8.9, and where we've put monies aside and to support the authority in financing its recovery, transformation and improvement plan. And also then in 8.10, it basically sets out that we'll be building on those plans and going forward and just into the future. We've had settlements of in excess of 4.5% for the last 2 financial years. We don't know what the future holds, but that'll be something we shall be planning for now over the next couple of months. So if I stop there, Chair, I've given a bit of a snapshot and an executive summary of where we lie with both the annual statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. So if I pause there and ask if there are any questions at this point.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions, members? Yes, Councillor Chaplin, and then followed by Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Excellent report, and thank you for all your work. Just a couple of questions on things that you actually mentioned. On page 24, you mentioned provision for further commitments of 118,000, but there's no explanation what those commitments cover. There's no note in the accounts to explain what they cover.
Yes, that was something that we had as a budget head, and it was to cover anything which it was as a contingency rate to just cover any awards for pay or just any other commitments that we might have in going forward. As it turned out, we had a remaining balance then of £118,000 against that line, which wasn't used. So hence then that plays a factor and plays its part in that surplus in going forward.
So it's not money that's been committed. It's actually just money that can be used as a contingency.
That is right. Yes,
okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, my second question and my final question, and obviously you've mentioned it a few times, the corporate vacancy factor of £681,000. And I noticed the other week there was 23 vacancies advertised on the council website for jobs they're looking to fill. Are we sure that we are delivering the services if we've got so many vacancies and taken so long to fill them? You know, are we meeting our commitments? Because obviously it's a lot of money and these vacancies have gone unfilled for a while.
Yes, it is a lot of money, and it was unexpected, I think, for last year. We will be factoring going forward and ensuring that potentially we reflect the corporate vacancy factor where it currently stands about £650,000, that we might increase that in going forward. As for the job advertising going forward, we are advertising as soon as we possibly can when just a vacancy arises. I can't actually comment across every single service whether that has had an impact on each of the services going forward, but it is certainly something that we are advertising as soon as we possibly can. As far as I'm concerned, I couldn't really answer whether or not it has had a negative impact on each service.
Yeah, it was just a surprise that all of a sudden we had 23 vacancies when we hadn't advertised for a while. Okay, thank you for your help, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple from me. First one, Steve, I echo Councillor Chaplin's comments, excellent report. So well done to yourself and your team for writing it in the easy to read manner that you have. You mentioned that the accounts are going to be submitted slightly late to audit and full council. Is there any reason for that, Steve? Or what is the reason for that, I should say?
It's a discussion we've had with Audit Wales, and it's felt that there was still a little bit of work which has had to be concluded. So it's a case of, it is a bit of a resource issue, I think, as well. So it is a case where we felt that, and to ensure that the whole of the audit work would be completed, that it's best to have that and to have the accounts then go back into the 18th of October. So I don't know if Helen wants to come in at this juncture as well.
Hi. Yes, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Yes, it was a mutual agreement between us and the council. It felt that the 4th of October, whereas we could meet it, there'd be a slight chance that we wouldn't. So rather than risk not meeting the 4th, we're quite confident that we'll meet the 18th. It's just to do with resource pressures on post side, things taking a little bit longer through the remote COVID audit process due to the COVID pandemic, and also due to, we need to factor in that when we get papers to committees, we're in effect working to 2 weeks prior to those deadlines. So we just thought, just on the off chance that we would miss it, it'd be safer to go with the 18th Audit and Governance Committee and then the 3rd of November Council then. So I hope that's agreeable with everybody.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm glad that that's been agreed between both parties. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Helen.
Okay.
Second question is on page 11, and it refers to the Riverside project phase 3, an underspend of £478,000, resulting from a lower than expected demolition cost, which is excellent news. I know they earmarked £1 million for that demolition work. I believe there's still a little bit of demolition work outstanding though with the old Racobites building. At the moment, it's been left in situ because of the bat nest in there. So I understand that once, or if they can get those bats relocated in some shape or form, that the building is still going to be demolished. So I take it that this money will be put aside for that.
Yes, that's right, Councillor Roberts. Yes, that is the case.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve.
Any other questions from members? I've got one, and I could ask it later on under the internal audit report, but I'll ask it here. In the budgeted the accounts there, you refer, I think, to there's capacity issues, which has already been raised by Councillor Chaplin. and we've set aside £705,000 for this initial trawl of covering these vacancies. But clearly we're on a journey with that, because it's been highlighted by the Improvement Board, Audit Wales, and Mark Thomas's internal report about the capacity issue. So clearly there's going to be another tranche to cover other capacity issues. Could you tell the committee, Steve, what the plan is for that, please?
Yes, at this point in time, we have had a number of further posts which are in respect of just the capacity issue. They're currently being actually reviewed by the corporate management team, and there is a plan that potentially there will be a further report which will come to council, and I at this point in time, I would estimate that report would be November-ish. That report would then come to council at the earliest would be November. But that would then be looking at the next phase of just capacity exercise, and where we look to address then some of the further critical posts which have been identified.
And will you have an indication in that report then of what the further costs there will be that you have to take into account for the budget for 22-23?
Indeed, yes, we will have the further costs involved, and we'll give an indication as well then of the impact in going forward and how that will be funded.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions from members? No one's indicated. No other questions. Any comments from members? If there are no comments, I'd just like to comment on the fact that the amount of work that's had to take place to get these accounts put together and done within the time frame, together with the annual governance statement. We're still in difficult times with the pandemic, and I'd like to record my thanks to everyone involved with the work connected with this. Yeah, no other comments. Can I take you back to page 5 and the recommendations there under 2.1, the provisional statement of accounts for 2021 be noted, and 2.2, the draft annual governance statement for 2021 be recommended for adoption by the leader and chief executive of the council. And as I said, I'll do the undertake the vote in the same way as council. So I'll start off with, are there any abstentions? Does anybody wish to vote against the recommendations? All those in favour of the recommendations on page 5, no vote now, please.
That's Tari, Chair.
You're on mute, Clive. I beg your pardon. I've been put myself on mute. Item 4, that's the annual internal audit report. To receive the report of the head of the regional internal audit service, pages 167 to 200, and Mark is going to take us through that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, if I just start by saying usual comment really for this report is the annual internal audit report, and from an internal audit perspective, it's the most important report of the year. And I'd like to start by recording my thanks basically to the Merthyr-based team and members of the regional team who've contributed to the work involved in pulling together this annual report. And sometimes we forget, isn't it, what sort of year we've had as well with the pandemic over the last 18 months as well. So so a lot of work has been done in very different circumstances to arrive at this report in front of you today. Because it's the annual report, I'll take members through it in a little bit of detail if everyone's happy with that, but I'll just perhaps focus on some of the key things and take you on to the introduction, which is on page 168 of the agenda papers. So the introduction and background, the purpose of the report is to provide the head of audit's annual opinion and to inform the audit committee, the governance and audit committee, of the work and performance of the internal audit team for the financial year 2021. The public sector internal audit standards require the head of audit to provide an annual report to support the annual governance statement. So obviously internal audit to play a key role in feeding into the annual governance statement and coordinating contributions from the authority in terms of that. The annual report needs to include an opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control, which I'll go on to talk about in a bit more detail, present a summary of the audit work undertaken, draw attention to any issues that may impact on the level of assurance provided, provide a summary of the performance of the service and comment on conformance to the public sector audit standards. And this annual report, I think, meets all those requirements. Paragraph 3.3 there refers to the head of audit is responsible for developing a risk-based annual plan which takes into account the Council's risk management framework, and within the standards there is also a requirement for me to review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes to the Council's business, risks, operations, programmes, systems, controls and resources, and it's a requirement on me to ensure that internal audit resources are appropriate, sufficient and effectively deployed to achieve the approved plan. Members will recall that the draft plan for 2021 was delayed in terms of presentation to Audit Committee in April 2020. However, the COVID-19 outbreak delayed the planning process as significant new risks and ways of working had to be considered to inform the plan. So therefore, the plan was approved on the 12th of October 2020, and it recognised there was would be a different emphasis due to the impact of COVID-19, particular risks arising from the pandemic, availability of staff and service staff and challenges arising from remote ways of working were all things that were factored in, and it was recognised the plan needed to be more flexible to be able to respond to the changing circumstances and events that may occur during the year, because we were all trying to look ahead, trying to work out how things would materialise during the year. So 2021 obviously has seen the pandemic have a major impact on how the council has had to operate and the governance arrangements and processes that were put in place to ensure it could continue to support residents and businesses during a difficult and challenging year. It also changed the way audits worked and audits were carried out during that year, and all staff have worked from home for the year. Audits have been conducted remotely using various digital solutions, holding remote meetings, sharing of screens with auditees and sending of data and evidence electronically. So there's quite a fundamental change to the way that we've worked. And whilst there was a steep learning curve both for audit staff and auditees, all have adjusted well to the new ways of working. Audits have taken longer in some instances due to responses to draft reports being delayed, where services have been under pressure, because some services in particular were under significant pressure for the first number of months of the pandemic. In terms of the current situation, going in a bit more detail, I'll refer you now to Appendix 1, which is the annual report itself. So if I scroll us down to that point, which is on page 173 to 1 and onwards in your agenda pack. And if I start by just giving you an overview of the summary of reviews undertaken in 2021. On page, to have a look, there's a number of tables there which sort of gives a breakdown of the work that we've done and the opinions that were given. But paragraph 2.7 on page 178, so it gives the summary. The information table 1 is summarised, and it shows that there was 24 assignments completed within the financial year, with 14 that resulted in an audit opinion. Included in the 24 assignments was the NFI data matching exercise and 1 special investigation. 6 reports related to work undertaken in 2019-20, but final reports issued at the start of 2021. The proportion of very good or satisfactory opinions has increased to 93%, which is a very high figure compared to 75% in the previous year. Additionally, for 2021, it can be seen that 1 report, 7%, 1 report was recorded as unsatisfactory. There were no reports issued with a poor opinion. So that's a very positive picture in terms of what we found in terms of the work that we've undertaken. Appendix B there, referred to it in paragraph 213, illustrates the number of planned audit reviews that have been undertaken during the year and the impact that has led to demands and services, as well as the impact of adopting remote working. Where planned work was not undertaken, assurance has been gained where possible from other sources of previous work and coverage in other audits. Some planned reviews were not undertaken during the year, some due to requests from services that were under intense pressure, and these will be considered in the 2021-22 plan. In addition, 7 audits were started and have been or are in the process of being completed at the moment. Although the pandemic did have some impact on the delivery of the internal audit plan, the level of internal audit coverage was still sufficient for me to be able to give an opinion as required. I mentioned earlier that there was only 1 report that gave an unsatisfactory opinion, and that was a follow-up audit on Cyfarthfa High School. And basically the bullet points there on page 179 sort of give you the background. It was a follow-up on a previous unsatisfactory audit, and whilst recognition was given to the school for the work undertaken and the progress made towards implementing the recommendations, especially given the difficulties faced as a result of the pandemic. And there were issues caused by COVID that meant that it was not possible to demonstrate that some recommendations had been implemented because the school was closed for a substantial part of the year. So 17 recommendations could not be evidenced as having been implemented, including 3 priority 1s, 13 priority 2s and 2 priority 3s. Our overall conclusion was that the assurance grade opinion assigned is still unsatisfactory. Whilst positive progress has been made, we were not yet in a position to be able to give a better opinion. Obviously, we've discussed that with the school, and what we've agreed is we will undertake a further follow-up later in this financial year to give assurance both to the school and to the council that the progress that we would have expected has been implemented. So we're not unhappy with the fact that the efforts that they've made, so obviously the circumstances meant that they weren't able to demonstrate that certain things were done. So I'm hopeful that the position will have changed later on during this financial year. As a general point, recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt improvements could be made to mitigate risk, improve governance or internal control, and recommendations are included in an implementation plan. And following each audit report, recipients are asked to complete an action plan showing their agreement to implementing an audit and an outline of timelines and so on. And we classify the recommendations according to 3 different priority levels. You can see there in table 4 the breakdown of the 92 recommendations that we've made: 17 priority 1s, 56 priority 2s and 19 priority 3s. So just to give you an overview on that, we will be undertaking some work later during this year on following up on the implementation of recommendations. We weren't in a position to do that last year because of the circumstances that we were all working in, but we plan to do a more concentrated piece of work on that later on this year. Counter fraud work, that's another important element. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but by way of background, members will be familiar that back in 2016, when the authority had a dedicated counter fraud team, when responsibilities for most of the work undertaken by that team were taken over by DWP, the team essentially transferred to DWP, so there was no dedicated counter fraud resource employed by the authority, but internal audit picked up certain elements of that work, including internal investigations and coordinating the National Fraud Initiative, for example. So during 2018-19 and 2019-20, a total of £28,000 worth of recoverable fraud or errors were identified through that initiative, and working with the services within the authority to work through that. A new National Fraud Initiative exercise has been commenced this year, with new data matches starting to be received. They will be issued to appropriate officers for further investigation as the year progresses, and we can give an update to the committee in due course on progress in relation to that work. The only other thing to mention, or a couple of points there, we've reviewed and updated a number of policies and protocols linked to counter fraud activity, which is referred to in 5.6. They've also been shared with Audit Wales for information and any comment, and is planned to take those for approval as soon as we can, so there are up-to-date policies and procedures in place. And I think it'd be worth mentioning, particularly in light of the comment around capacity generally, paragraph 5.8 there, consideration has been given with the Chief Finance Officer to the best way of resourcing counter fraud activity, as there is no dedicated counter fraud resource at the council, unlike other councils in the footprint of the shared service, and this needs strengthening, and we're hoping that some savings can be achieved as a result of investing in that type of role. A few other points just to flag up. I'll just the section there, key performance measures and client satisfaction questionnaires, positive feedback on that. So I won't dwell on the detail there. There's mention then in section 7 around the key performance measures and staff training, and the training that staff undergo. Section 8 refers to, again, key performance measures linked to benchmarking and comparing performance with national averages and so on, which I think overall presents a fairly positive picture. Section 9 talks about the public sector internal audit standards and identifies that we are in compliance with those standards as well. Section 10, which is on page 188 of the agenda pack, refers to the progress of the Regional Internal Audit Service. As members will be aware, the expanded shared service came into existence on the 1st of April 2019. So this report relates to the second year of the service. And as you know, this service is hosted by the Vale of Glamorgan and provides internal audit services to the Vale, Bridgend, Merthyr Tydfil and Rhondda and Taff councils. One of the key things for us was to establish a new staffing structure. That has now been agreed, and pleased to say consultation with the trade unions and staff has also taken place and been concluded, and we're currently going through the detailed HR process in terms of staff claiming matching to certain roles, so then we can progress with filling vacancies as well. So that's happening over the next month or so. So progress is being made on that. In terms of the collaborative working arrangements, that has benefited the level of service provided to the council, because staff based in Bridgend and the Vale were utilised to assist in some of the National Fraud Initiative related work, and we also commissioned some external support via the South West Audit Partnership to undertake some specific audits due to the pandemic and the couple of vacancies and sickness that we suffered during the year. Okay, moving on, which is probably the most important aspect, which is section 11, the opinion statement. As I mentioned earlier, one of the requirements of the annual report is to give an opinion on risk management, governance and internal control arrangements at the authority. And page 190 of the report sets out some of the key factors associated with that. So it's not just the work that undertaken by internal audit, but we also need to take into account any work undertaken by external regulators or work undertaken by the authority themselves. As you may recall, and last year I had basically given an unsatisfactory opinion overall due to the things that had been identified in the reports issued by what's known as the Gilbert report, and then the report produced by the Improvement and Assurance Board. This year, I'm pleased to be able to say that they've given an overall satisfactory opinion. that is based on the work that we've undertaken, as I've said already, but also the follow-up review undertaken by Audit Wales earlier on in the year, and have quoted a number of positive elements from that report, which I think has been accepted by full council earlier on in the year, and in particular recognition of the progress that's been made in the council and the way it was able to deal with the issues presented by the pandemic. So on page 193 of the report, it does refer to 10 recommendations that were made by Audit Wales, and it's already been mentioned in this meeting so far. The first one is about addressing lack of capacity in certain areas that obviously the council is fully aware of and is taking forward. So basically, if I just move on, the opinion is both for risk management. Well, risk management, governance and internal control has been given as satisfactory, and that's presented in a summary statement on page 195, which I'm pleased to be able to do. But obviously I've got to flag up the underlying concerns around capacity and the longer term financial resilience, because public sector finances are likely to be under pressure in the future, but the authority is in a much stronger position than it was going back a year ago. So that's good news. I think that's all I was going to say at this point, but obviously happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from members? I have one, Mark, and it's in relation to page 197. It follows on from the page which is headed Summary of Internal Audit Reports for 2020-21. And on page 197, you've listed there reports issued in respect of 1920 during 2020-21. And the bottom three of those all relate to schools: Goitra Primary, Cyfarthfa High, Hugh Gerrig Primary School. Is it fairly normal practice that you usually have quite a high number of recommendations when you come to undertaking audits on the various schools?
I think basically what we've found is over experience is that our programs for when we undertake school audits are very detailed. So there's a terrific amount of ground that we cover when we undertake an audit, and audits are undertaken, every few years, and it varies really depending on circumstances, how often they are undertaken. So obviously the one we mentioned around Cyfarthfa, there was a significant number of recommendations made because things weren't as they should have been, and similarly on with the other two primary schools. But what we are looking at undertaking, and we've spoken to Sue Walker about this, and she's in full agreement, is trying to develop an approach of self-assessment within schools, which is quite similar to a number of other authorities, where a detailed checklist and expectations are given to schools to work through. We can support them with that exercise. They self-assess themselves, so they are clear on what the expectations are, because what can happen is if there's a change in staff, particularly from the administrative point of view, sometimes things don't always get carried forward in the way that they should in terms of procedures and so on. So this would be seen as a positive way of schools taking ownership of what they should be doing from an administrative and financial management perspective, and then internal audit then can identify where schools are identifying where they've got gaps, and we can support them and then take audits in those particular areas. So it's not unusual, but it's partly a consequence of the detail of the audit programs that we've got and the frequency with which we undertake these audits. So does that answer your question, Chair?
Yes, thank you, Mark, very much. Any other questions from members? Not. Any comments? I'd just like to make a comment. It's pleasing to see that you've got a satisfactory opinion for the last financial year, Mark. obviously we need to keep on that same track and hopefully improve on that as well. On the financial side, you are right in indicating that there have been good settlements, certainly for the last 2 years. But I have a funny feeling that that situation is going to be on the downward movement next year. The UK government have got a mini budget programmed, I think, for the 27th of October. And then there's a spending review in November. So it's going to be very interesting as to what will come out of that. That'll be a good indication, more than likely, as to what our settlement is going to be by the Welsh Government for next year. Councillor Roberts, you wanted to make a comment, and then Councillor Andrew Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's in relation to Mark's comment around the schools doing a self-assessment approach. For me, I think that makes perfect sense. They can obviously assess themselves, and then we can obviously make judgments on their assessment, so that I think the schools and the local authority and external auditors are all singing off the same hymn sheet, because when it comes to schools, it can be quite complex and there's a lot of areas that need addressing. So for me, I think that's a step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the settlements. Myself and Steve have done some quite forensic analysis of the improved position, obviously, of the authority over the last several years. We have had improved settlements, that's no doubt, but it's only between 50 and 60%. Does that account for our improved financial position? Financial prudency within that, with a number of measures that we've taken, have meant we're in a far better position than we are now, than we were then. Sorry, we continue to review how we can better run our finances in this council, and I think it's Steve, I think it'd be worth us sharing that analysis of the past few years at some point in a report to show exactly where we are and how the position has improved, because we just need every member to have that clarity as to what element of it is Welsh Government revenue settlement and what element of it is prudent financial management, so we can see that distance travelled by this authority over that period. The other things that we have in train to ensure we keep these finances under control. We have fleet reviews where we were spending 1.65 million on the fleet. We're now looking at taking the fleet review, the asset and estate management, and the decarbonisation reviews to make them closer related to how we hold those areas to account as well. There's a way to go yet before we are happy with the position that we hold financially. I think, Chair, you're right. Belts are going to tighten over the next few years. Our position is that by these various reviews that we continue to hold and making people accountable for what are potential savings and potential efficiencies, then that's how we become sustainable. We have to look at every aspect of our business, but I think clarity as to what we can do to make ourselves more efficient and effective, and clarity to the revenue grant is essential for members to know, I think. So, Steve, if we can bring that report at some point to make everybody aware of where we actually are. And I think that just adds to a sustainable future for this county borough and continued sort of trajectory of more stable and financial future as well. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, you're on mute.
Any other comments from members? No. If not, I will then take you to page 168. That's the recommendations under 2.2.1 that members give due consideration to the annual internal audit report for the financial year 2021, including the head of audit annual opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control. Take you through the voting process now. Any abstentions? Anyone voting against? All those voted in favour, please show.
Carry, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. The agenda. The next item is the reflection and evaluation of the meeting. I think we've done justice to the previous items and asked pertinent questions on that.
Chair, have you,
Chair.
Yep.
Chair, have you missed out item 5?
Yeah,
It's agenda 5, Chair.
Item 5, Chair.
Oh, I beg
Page
you,
201.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're quite right. I beg your pardon. Item 5, the Governance and Audit Committee updated forward work programme. Sorry, and Mark, you're going to take us through that, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it shouldn't take very long at all, and we've touched on some of the key points anyway. This is something that we started presenting on a regular basis to the committee. It's the forward work programme for the rest of the year. So you'll see in the appendix when we plan to take different items to future committee meetings. But in addition, we've included in this particular report a quarterly programme update from Audit Wales colleagues as well, which came about as a requirement of the Local Government and Elections Act. So I wasn't going to go through that in detail, but I'm sure there's members here from Audit Wales who'd be happy to take questions on that particular item. The bit I wanted to flag up was, and we've already discussed this at the time of writing the report, the Special Audit Governance and Audit Committee on the 4th of October was to cover an update on corporate risks, the annual performance report, but critically the audit of accounts and the financial statement of accounts and so on. We've already heard earlier on from Steve and Helen that it's felt prudent that those items go to the planned scheduled audit committee, governance and audit committee meeting on the 18th of October. But we've had some conversations internally, and we still need the special meeting to receive the update on corporate risks and the annual performance report. So that was only made clear today, really. So just to sort of make sure, draw members' attention, and I haven't had a chance to speak to Myra about this either. So we still need a special audit committee on the 4th of October, but it'll be for the update on corporate risks and the annual performance report, because those matters are going to council very shortly afterwards. And then the accounts related reports will be going to the scheduled meeting on the 18th of October. So just to bring members up to speed on that. So unfortunately, or fortunately, you'll have had 3 committee meetings in the space of 6 weeks. So a bit like buses, they all come along at once. So
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions on the updated forward work programme, which you can see that includes the Audit Wales work programme timetable for with the Tidwell County Borough Council? Any questions? Anyone? I notice heading on the Audit Wales, particularly with the local government national studies planned progress. There are a number of those where it's to be confirmed. That's marked on the problem we've got.
I'll let Ian answer that if that's okay. He
Right.
knows more
Yeah,
about it than me.
Yeah, fine.
Yes, Chair. Well, this update's probably actually a couple of months out of date now because it didn't go to the last committee, which was cancelled. It probably would have been on the agenda for that one. Some are still at scoping stage. These updates will be done quarterly, so the next one will probably come around quicker than 3 months, because this one's a little bit late, if that makes sense. The next one will cover the period up to the end of September. So a lot of these will have updates the next time committee gets it, which should be either October or November, depending on how much time we need to turn around to collate everything. But another one will come with updates.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from members? No. Any comments, members? No. If not, I'd take you to page 201, and that's the recommendations, and the 2.1 that members approve the updated forward work programme for 21-22, and 2.2 that members are asked to endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting on the 4th of October, and confirm the list of people who would like to invite to each item if appropriate, and indicate whether any additional information is required. There's the recommendations. I'll take you through the voting process. Any abstentions? Anyone wishing to vote against? All those in favour, please vote no.
It's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Now then, back to the agenda. We've already dealt with item 6 as well. Number 7, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I have none. And could I ask for a mover in section 100, because there's an exempt item there on number 8.
Happy to move, Chair.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Councillor Roberts and seconded by Councillor Tuvey. All those, any abstentions? Anyone voted against? All those in favour, please show no.
Carried, Chair.
Chair. Okay, I'll wait a moment until you let me know when we're ready to continue.